All right, let's dive in. You've given us a ton of info about network effects,
Yeah.
mostly from Andrew Chen's book, The Cold Start Problem.
Uh,
And it seems like you're not just interested in like the textbook definition. You,
right.
you want to know how these things play out, in the
Yeah.
wild from those first like shaky steps
Yeah.
all the way up to, you know, the problems they face when they get massive. We've got stories about Uber,
Yeah. Fascinating stuff.
Airbnb, Tinder, Dropbox,
hmm
even the rise and fall of Usenet. So,
Our goal today
yeah.
is to pull out those key insights
Yeah.
about network effects and leave you with some really thought-provoking questions.
So, we know network effects mean like the product gets more valuable the more people are using it.
Right.
The telephone's a classic example.
Uh-huh.
More users, more powerful communication tool.
Yeah.
But how does that translate to the digital world? We're not
Yeah.
stringing wires between houses anymore.
True. But think about something like Facebook or Slack. Their value just explodes when your friends, family, colleagues are on it.
Right.
Suddenly, you're connected, you're sharing, you're collaborating.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't be possible with just a handful of users.
Right. And it's like that feeling you get when you join some new social media platform
Right.
and none of your friends are there yet.
That's
It's just
it.
not that fun.
Which brings us to that big, scary hurdle
Yeah.
that Andrew Chen talks about, the
Yeah.
cold start problem.
Exactly. Small networks, they're fragile.
Right.
Chen uses this term, the alley threshold.
Oh, wow.
It's borrowed from ecology.
Okay.
It illustrates this perfectly. Picture a small group of meerkats. Right.
Yeah.
Too few.
Yeah.
And they can't warn each other about predators effectively.
Nah.
Their numbers, they dwindle, the network collapses.
Right.
Same thing can happen with a new social app or marketplace.
So how do you avoid becoming meerkat lunch? How do you build that initial momentum, get things going?
Well, Chen calls the solution building an atomic network.
Okay. That's the smallest group of users that can create enough value to stick around
Right, yeah.
and attract more users. Tinder's launch is a perfect example of this.
Okay.
They focused on college parties at USC,
Right.
creating this dense network
Yeah.
with similar demographics, interests.
So instead of trying to like boil the ocean,
Yeah,
they went with a very specific, tight-knit group.
exactly.
Smart.
Very smart.
So once you have that initial spark,
Right.
the next challenge is like, how do you scale beyond
Right.
that first
Yeah.
atomic network?
It's not just about one campfire.
Yeah.
It's about creating many campfires
Yeah.
and then eventually a wildfire.
So how do you make that leap? I'm thinking about Bank AmeriCard,
Yeah,
later became Visa.
right.
Didn't they have a pretty unique strategy?
They did. Back in the 1950s, they chose Fresno, California as their testing ground. But instead of this slow rollout, they mailed out 60,000 credit cards, no application needed simultaneously, created an instant ripping point, ensuring enough cardholders to entice those merchants to sign up.
So they basically engineered that critical mass up front
Right.
in a very strategic location
Exactly.
and then expanded outward. It's almost like a controlled explosion.
Exactly. And this atomic network concept, reaching that tipping point, it applies across the board.
Yeah.
Whether it's a credit card, a social app,
Right.
even a video game console. Remember when Nintendo launched the Switch?
Oh, yeah.
Gamers wouldn't buy the console without great games, right?
Right.
But developers wouldn't make them without a large user base. Classic chicken and egg.
Totally.
What did they do? Went all in on their hard side.
Okay.
Released the console alongside those blockbuster titles like Mario Odyssey and Zelda, Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
They basically funded the creation of their initial must-have content.
That's risky, but it makes sense.
Right.
Because by guaranteeing those high-quality games,
Right.
they attracted the gamers,
Yeah.
which then brought in more developers to make even more great content.
Right. Precisely. And this idea of attracting the hard side, this is crucial.
Okay.
It's about understanding that not all users contribute equally to a network's value.
Okay, so tell me more about this hard side. Who are they? Why are they so important?
Think about Wikipedia.
Good.
Millions of readers, but it's a relatively small group of dedicated editors creating and maintaining all that content.
Yeah.
They are the hard side, the value creators.
Okay.
Same with YouTube. Uploaders versus viewers.
Right.
Attracting them, keeping them happy, essential.
So for a platform to really thrive,
Right.
it needs to cater to those power users, the content creator, the ones who are really active, the ones who draw in the rest of us.
Exactly. And Tinder, they understood this too.
Yeah.
They recognized that in online dating, women were often the hard side. So they designed the app to prioritize the female experience. Features like the double opt-in, the ability to unmatch easily.
So it wasn't just about attracting women as users. It was about like understanding their needs, creating an environment where they felt safe and in control.
Exactly.
And by attracting that hard side, they built a more balanced and ultimately more successful network for everyone.
Precisely. Understanding your hard side users, their motivations, catering to their needs, it's key to overcoming that cold start and building a thriving network.
But even after you've tackled the cold start and you've got your hard side humming along, the challenge then becomes maintaining that momentum. It's one thing to get a rocket off the ground. But how do you achieve like escape velocity and keep it going?
Excellent question. That brings us to this fascinating concept from Chen's book, The Trio of Forces Driving Sustainable Growth.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's break those forces down, see how they work in the real world. I'm betting there are some pretty interesting examples of companies that got this right. And maybe some that didn't.
So, we've talked about sparking those initial network effects, reaching that critical tipping point. But even when a platform achieves like escape velocity, there are forces that can slow it down, even bring it to a standstill.
Oh, wow.
Like hitting an invisible ceiling.
So even the most successful companies aren't immune to this. What causes that slowdown?
Well, there are several factors.
Okay.
But let's start with market saturation.
Okay.
Take eBay. In the early 2000s, they'd grown at this incredible pace. But eventually, they had attracted, most of their target market. Finding new users became a real struggle.
So it's like they'd converted all the eBay people out there.
Exactly.
What happened next?
Well, customer acquisition costs just skyrocketed.
Oh, wow.
The pool of potential new users, it shrank. Meaning they had to spend more and more on marketing for each new customer.
Ouch, that's gotta hurt. Did they try to get around this?
They did.
Okay.
They expanded internationally, hoping to find like these fresh markets. But that came with its own set of hurdles. Different cultures, languages, payment systems.
Of course.
They also tried introducing new product categories. Even experimented with like fixed price listings and online storefronts.
So they were trying to like diversify and find new avenues for growth. Did any of it work?
To some degree, yes.
Okay.
But the reality was that market saturation effect was just too strong to completely overcome.
Wow.
Even for a powerhouse like eBay, those network effects had reached a point of diminishing returns.
So what's the lesson here? Is hitting the ceiling just like an inevitability for any like network-based company?
It's not about avoiding the ceiling altogether, but understanding that growth, it isn't linear. It happens in a series of what we call S-curves. You have those initial bursts of like rapid growth, followed by a leveling off, and then potentially new S-curves. As you innovate or tap into new markets.
It's like riding a wave, right? You can't stay at the crest forever.
Exactly.
So how do companies ride those waves effectively?
Well, adaptability is key.
Okay.
Companies need to anticipate those shifts and adjust their strategies. That could mean exploring new markets, launching new products, or even a complete reinvention.
Wow.
Think about what Justin.tv did.
Oh, yeah, the live streaming platform. They pivoted pretty dramatically, didn't they?
They did. Justin.tv, they'd hit a ceiling with a few million users, but they saw this potential in this exploding world of esports and gaming. They rebranded as Twitch and became like the go-to platform for watching and streaming video game content.
That's a pretty incredible turnaround. It seems like they were able to spot a new wave forming and ride it to massive success.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that even when a network seems to have plateaued, there's always that potential for growth and reinvention if you're willing to adapt.
But making those kinds of changes, especially for big companies, it can't be easy, right? There's got to be like internal resistance, a fear of upsetting the apple cart.
You're absolutely right. Chen talks about the challenges of innovating within larger organizations.
Right.
He argues that executives, they often focus on what he calls vanity metrics.
Okay.
Things like user growth
Right.
or revenue, without really looking at like the underlying health
Right.
of the network.
So they're more concerned with appearances than actually building like a thriving community.
Unfortunately, that can happen.
Yeah.
And it leads to like these short-sighted decisions that prioritize quick wins over long-term sustainability.
Yeah.
Google Plus is a perfect example.
Google's attempt to compete with Facebook. What went wrong there?
Well, on paper, Google Plus Rome, they had impressive user numbers.
Okay.
But a lot of those users, they were inactive. They've been pushed there from other Google products like Gmail, not because they were like genuinely interested.
So it was a case of quantity over quality.
Exactly.
They might have had a crowd, but it wasn't a community.
Precisely. In the end, Google Plus failed. Because it lacked those real network effects. That sense of community that Facebook had.
It's a reminder that even with like vast resources, brilliant engineers, success isn't guaranteed. If you don't understand the fundamental dynamics of network effects, it's not enough to just build a platform. You have to cultivate a thriving ecosystem.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Okay, so let's recap for a sec. We've got the cold start problem, the tipping point, escape velocity, and then hitting that ceiling, which we just discussed. What comes next?
The final stage, where networks that have navigated those earlier stages have the chance to build a true moat.
The moat.
Yeah.
Every castle needs a good moat to keep the invaders at bay.
Yeah.
So in the context of networks, what exactly does that look like?
Well, it's about creating a set of advantages that are incredibly difficult for competitors to overcome. And one of the most powerful ways to build that moat is by focusing on the hard side of the network.
There's that hard side again. Those value-creating users are proving to be pretty important throughout this whole life cycle of a network.
Absolutely. And building a moat around them is about understanding their needs, addressing their concerns, creating a platform where they can truly thrive. Remember how Uber used like those targeted bonuses to attract and retain their most active drivers? That's a classic example.
They prioritize keeping their hard side happy, and it paid off. What are some other strategies for like building a moat?
Well, another one is bundling, where you leverage an existing network to launch new products or features. Think about Microsoft and how they integrated Internet Explorer with Windows. It gave them a huge advantage in those early days of the web.
So it's like using your existing stronghold to conquer new territories.
Exactly. Bundling can be a very effective way to gain market share and create that barrier to entry, but it's not a guaranteed win.
You're thinking about Microsoft's Bing, Even though they bundled it with Windows, it never really took off. Because Google was just a better product.
Precisely. Bundling, it can give you a head start, but in the end, the product has to stand on its own merits.
So it's not just about clever tactics. It's about building a product that users genuinely love and rely on. It's about creating that value that keeps people coming back.
You've got it. And that brings us to another important aspect of building a moat: intangible assets.
Intangible assets? I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So it's about cultivating those elements that are harder to quantify. But just as crucial, things like brand reputation, user trust, a strong community culture. Think about Airbnb. Versus Wimdu, the European company that tried to take them on.
That was a classic network battle.
It was.
Why was Airbnb ultimately able to hold on to their dominance?
Yes. Well, Wimdu, they raised a lot of money. And they scaled quickly, but they couldn't unseat Airbnb. Airbnb had this more global network, giving them a broader reach and appeal to travelers. Wimdu is kind of fighting a global war with a regional army. Did anything else contribute to Airbnb's success?
What else was going on there?
Airbnb had also spent years cultivating a strong brand and reputation. They were known for providing those quality accommodations and excellent customer service. Travelers trusted them.
So in addition to the size of their network, they had built up these like intangible assets, trust, reputation.
It's a
It's a sense of community
Yeah.
that were hard for a competitor to replicate.
Exactly. In a world where features can be copied,
Right.
prices can be undercut.
Yeah.
Those intangible assets can be a powerful differentiator.
It's almost like a network's personality or aura, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to define, but you know it when you see it.
Right.
And it seems like those intangible assets, along with strategic moves like bundling, play a crucial role
They do.
in building that lasting moat.
Absolutely. And remember, building a moat, it's not a one-time event.
Right.
It's an ongoing process
Yeah.
of reinforcing your advantages
Okay.
and adapting to the ever-changing landscape.
Like building a castle on shifting sands. You have to keep adapting and rebuilding to stay ahead of the tide.
You've got it. And in the fast-paced world of technology, that tide is always changing. But there's another element of the network landscape that we haven't touched on yet.
Okay.
One that can significantly impact a platform's future. Network revolts.
Okay, I've got to hear more about this.
Yeah.
What are network revolts?
Yeah.
And what makes them so important?
Imagine this. A YouTube creator has spent years building a loyal audience, creating content, generating millions of views. They're like a mini media empire, right? But their success is completely dependent on YouTube's platform. Then YouTube makes a change maybe to their algorithm or content moderation policy. Suddenly this creator's views, they plummet. Or their videos get demonetized.
I can see how that would create some serious tension. You're building your success on someone else's land, so to speak. And that tension is at the heart of these network revolts, right?
Yeah, it's about this power imbalance between the platform and its creators.
So how do these revolts, play out? What forms do they take?
Well, they can range from online protests to boycotts to even migrating to competing platforms. Reddit, for example, has seen its share of blackouts where moderators shut down entire sections of the site to protest policy changes.
It's a way for the community to flex its muscles and say, hey, we have power here too.
Precisely. And these revolts, they can be very disruptive.
I bet.
Costing platforms, traffic, revenue, goodwill. But they're also often driven by something deeper. A sense of betrayal or a loss of trust.
It's not always just about the money or control. It's about feeling like the platform doesn't value the community that made it successful.
Exactly. Creators often have this strong sense of ownership over their communities. And when a platform makes changes that feel harmful or disrespectful, it can feel very personal.
It's like that feeling when your favorite band sells out to a major label and loses its edge.
A great analogy.
Yeah.
Chen talks about how Twitter's acquisition of Vine led to this sense of disillusionment. Vine had this tight-knit community of creators.
I remember Vine. It was so unique. What happened?
Well, after the acquisition, Twitter, they seemed more focused on attracting celebrities and advertisers than nurturing the community that made Vine special. Creators felt used and discarded, which led to a mass exodus, and eventually the platform's demise.
It's a cautionary tale. So how can platforms avoid this kind of downfall? Is it just about giving creators more money and control?
It's more nuanced than that. It's about building a genuine partnership, recognizing creators' value, and giving them a real voice in the platform's decisions.
So it's about shifting from a landlord-tenant relationship to a more collaborative model where everyone benefits.
Exactly.
How do you make that happen? What are some of the keys to avoiding these network revolts?
One crucial step is transparency. Platforms need to be upfront about their policies, their algorithms, how they generate revenue. That openness, it builds trust. Helps creators feel like they're not being, kept in the dark.
Because when people feel like decisions are being made behind closed doors, they tend to, assume the worst. It just breeds suspicion and resentment.
Exactly. And alongside transparency, communication is key. Platforms need to be proactive
Right.
in reaching out to creators, listening to their concerns,
Mm.
providing, clear and timely feedback.
So it's about building like a two-way street, a
Yeah.
dialogue,
Yeah.
rather than just handing down decrees
Exactly.
from on high.
Precisely.
Okay.
And when platforms do implement changes,
Yeah.
they need to explain the reasoning behind them.
Right.
Clearly give creators sufficient time
Right.
to adapt.
It's about treating creators like partners,
Right.
not just resources to be exploited.
Exactly.
Recognizing that their success is intertwined with the platform's success.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's a symbiotic relationship.
Right.
But even with the best communication
Yeah.
and intentions, disagreements are bound to happen.
Right.
That's where having a fair and impartial system
Okay.
for resolving disputes is essential.
So if a creator feels like they've been wronged.
Right. There's a clear process for addressing that grievance.
Exactly.
What might that look like?
Well, it could involve like a dedicated support team,
Okay.
a community forum,
Right.
where creators can voice their concerns,
Mhm.
or even a more like formal arbitration process
Okay.
for, complex cases.
Right.
The key is that the process is perceived as fair and unbiased,
Yeah.
not just a rubber stamp for whatever the platform wants to do.
Because if creators feel like the system is rigged against them,
Right.
it's just going to make them more likely to revolt.
Exactly.
Right.
It erodes trust,
Yeah.
creates a sense of powerlessness.
Right.
But when platforms take the time to build those strong relationships with their creators,
Yeah.
when they prioritize transparency,
Right.
open communication,
Mhm.
and fair dispute resolution, they're much more likely to avoid those
Yeah. Right.
disruptive network revolts.
It sounds like the platforms that thrive in the long run.
Are the ones that recognize they're not just tech companies,
Right.
they're community builders.
That's a great insight.
Yeah.
The platforms that prioritize the health and well-being of their communities,
Right.
that create that sense of belonging, shared purpose,
Mhm.
they're the ones that are most likely to weather the storms
Yeah.
and achieve lasting success.
So we've covered a lot of ground
Yeah.
in this deep dive. We've explored
Right.
the mechanics of network effects, the stages of growth, the strategies for building a moat,
Right.
and the importance of navigating those sometimes turbulent relationships between platforms and creators.
Mm-hmm.
What are your final thoughts for a listener today?
Well, whether you're building a product, investing
Right.
in a company, or just fascinated by, the digital world,
Right.
understanding network effects is essential.
Oh.
They're not just these abstract concepts.
Right.
They're the forces shaping the digital landscape. Yeah.
Influencing everything from how we communicate
Right.
to how we consume information to how we do business.
It's like having a secret decoder ring
Yeah.
for understanding the dynamics of the digital age.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as technology evolves
Right.
and new networks emerge,
Mm-hmm.
these dynamics will only become more important.
So keep your eyes open for those network effects.
Mm-hmm.
They're everywhere,
They are.
shaping our lives in ways we're only beginning to understand.
And remember,
Yeah.
the journey of a network
Yeah.
is a complex one, full of twists and turns, opportunities and challenges.
Right.
But the potential rewards
Yeah.
for both creators and platforms are immense.
So stay curious, stay engaged,
Right.
and keep exploring the fascinating world of network effects. And be sure to let us know what you think.
What new kinds of networks do you see emerging? What challenges and opportunities do they present? Until next time, keep diving deep.